Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede, and we begin with Republican State Senator Blaise Ingoglia, who is sponsoring the legislation to rewrite Florida's death penalty statute to make it easier for juries to execute people in Florida. This follows the public outrage over the fact that 3 jurors did not believe Nikolas Cruz should be executed, so he received life in prison instead. But before we got into that conversation, I asked him about his bill to ban the Democratic Party in Florida because a century ago it supported slavery. It's not a serious bill, just the type of political theater Republicans love.
Well, slavery is a serious subject, and I just get very frustrated when I see leftist Democrats out there trying to cancel people, places, or things, including taking down the statues and monuments and renaming buildings, all because of something that somebody did 250 years ago, and that was obviously tied to slavery. So if you take the rules at cancel culture on its face, that no matter what you do today, you should be judged by the sins of yesteryear and what you did in the past, then by the same exact metric, by that same logic, the Democrat Party should be canceled itself because they adopted pro-slavery and even the expansion of slavery platforms in their party platform.
This bill isn't going anywhere. This bill isn't a serious piece of legislation. So is it just to provoke a conversation?
Oh, it's a serious piece of legislation. I just don't know if it's going to go anywhere, just the same way I cannot predict if any pieces of legislation are going to get across the finish line. But at the very least, what we're seeing is that we're starting a conversation, and that Democrats all over the United States and here in Florida are now admitting, because they have to admit, that the Democrats, yes, indeed, put pro-slavery and the expansion of slavery in their party platforms.
All right, let's talk about what I think is probably a more realistic bill that you're likely to pass, which deals with death penalty reform. This bill, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, stems from the Nikolas Cruz jury verdict, in which I believe there were 2 members of the jury. I think it was a 10-2 vote, not to, or 10 people wanted him executed, 2 people said no to him being executed, and as a result, he has now been sentenced to life in prison. This bill is in response to that. Tell me what this bill would now do.
So first, I think if I remember correctly, it was 9-3, and there was another issue with the other juror. I don't think it was 10-2, but I may be mistaken. But this bill is meant so scumbags like Nikolas Cruz gets the death penalty and he does not escape with life. What this bill will do is it sets the bar, which is now unanimous, which was basically predicated on a faulty Supreme Court decision, which has since been receded by the Florida Supreme Court, that allows the legislature to set the new bar, and it does not have to be unanimous. And now what we are saying is that it's an 8-4 jury recommendation to the judge to impose death. But what's important to note also is that there are 2 sets of bars that you have to cross in order to impose death. The first is that you have the jury, all 12, unanimously agree to at least one of the aggravators listed in Florida statute. And then once all 12 agree, that becomes eligible for the jury to then vote on will they impose death. And it's that vote that we're changing 8-4. So it's still a very high bar that we're doing, but this ensures that scumbags like Nikolas Cruz do not see the light of day ever again. If there's anybody who deserves the death penalty, it's that guy.
And there are many, many people who would not disagree with you, but
including the Parkland families. Families, a lot of Parkland families agree because they have seen firsthand what a miscarriage of justice happened in that courtroom.
But how do you write legislation based on the outcome in one case? That seems to me to be a recipe for making bad law.
I believe that juries should not be unanimous in picking the death penalty and choosing the death penalty, because I do not believe in protest jurors. I do not believe that 1 or 2 jurors can prevent the rest of the panel of 12 from imposing a death penalty, because we know that there are people who stay silent during jury selections that purposely try to get on juries because they do not want the death penalty imposed. activist jurors should have no place in in judicial discourse when it comes to this. 8-4 is a supermajority. It is still a high bar when you couple it with the unanimous aggravators.
You seem to be implying that these were activist jurors who were not living up to their responsibility in the Parkland case. That trial went on for months and months and months. And now you are going to substitute your judgment. You're going to say they got it wrong, so therefore we're going to rewrite the entire state statute on death penalty to right their screw up. And it just seems to me that it's insulting to jurors, you know, that you think you should be replacing your judgment for theirs in that case, and therefore you're going to rewrite the entire statute on death penalties.
So I'm not saying that these jurors specifically were activists. What I'm saying is that there are activists that get on to jurors, not just in Florida, but across the United States. I'm not saying that the people on this specific jury did that. But what I am saying is that if Nicholas Cruz escapes the death penalty, if there's any other heinous crime that somebody walks into a school and shoots innocent children, if that person doesn't get the death penalty, then what do we have the death penalty for?
Why not write a different law? Why not say that if anyone convicted of walking into a school and killing 10 or more children, it will automatically be put to death? Why even have a trial? Why have a jury? If you don't want to trust the jury system to reach a verdict, take the jury out of it. Write a piece of legislation that says, you know, once you've been found to have done this, you'll be summarily executed.
Well, because number one, the legislature has the authority per the Supreme Court ruling in order to make the determination and what the level that a jury can impose. But we also have a constitutional process, right? We have people are innocent until proven guilty in this country. And we still have the process. So we let the process go through. And what we're doing is we're just changing, not necessarily the outcome, because we're not trying to change outcomes. We're trying to change
outcomes. Of course you're trying to change outcomes. You're taking it from a unanimous verdict to an 8-4 verdict, which is a much easier standard to meet to be able to put more people to death. Look, a lot of people, the problem is you're taking the Nicholas Cruz case and using that to rewrite the entire death penalty statute. And I'm just wondering, is that the best way to make law?
Yeah, but look, it's not just the Nicholas Cruz situation. You actually have activist judges, right, that are sitting on benches where you have, who again have been elected, that will never ever let a death penalty go through. You have activist judges that are put on benches where a jury will come back with the unanimous declaration, all 12 of them saying that, yes, this person should be put to death. But the judge then will deviate and has deviated before.
And how many times
with no explanation.
How many times
I think that happened about, don't quote me, I'd have to check with my state attorney, but I think it happened in about eight cases over the last 10 years.
I guess, Blaise, what I'm trying to understand is, why do you have such contempt for the third branch of government, the judiciary? You don't trust jurors, and clearly you don't trust judges either. So, you know, should the legislature really be in a position to say, we don't trust, I mean, I guess that's your argument, is you don't trust the judicial system to reach a verdict.
What I trust is the legislature to come up with the balance of where we can deliver justice for people who commit heinous crimes, just like Nicholas Cruz.
Let's turn to immigration. You had mentioned earlier that you are working on and will be drafting and introducing in the legislature an immigration bill. Can you give us a preview as to what that will say?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say is that this is, I believe it's going to be a landmark piece of legislation. It is going to be the most comprehensive piece of state-led illegal immigration. And what it's doing, it's taking away a lot of the magnets that are sort of enticing people to come over a porous, open southern border that we have right now. We know that the federal government is just atrocious. They're abysmal when it comes to federal immigration enforcement. We have an open border. We have a broken legal immigration system, and illegal immigration is just running off the charts. The whole thing is running amok. So what this piece of legislation will do is have enhanced penalties for people who knowingly hire illegal immigrants for businesses. It is going to not recognize out-of-state licenses, driver's licenses like that in California, if they're in the state of Florida. So if somebody gets pulled over and they have an out-of-state license, the law enforcement should proceed as if they didn't have any driver's licenses. The state of Florida has a statewide preemption on issuing ID cards and driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. Some cities or counties are getting around that. They're giving money to nonprofit organizations for them to come up with these community IDs. And the sole purpose of the community IDs is to go back so they can get government services from the very governmental entity that gave the nonprofit the money in the first place. So there's going to be increased fines and criminal penalties for people who engage in human smuggling. Those are the type of things that we're talking about. And what I hope to accomplish with this piece of legislation is that other states like Texas are going to look at what Florida did, and maybe Texas will adopt something similar. So if we can get Florida and Texas both to adopt a similar anti-illegal immigrant legislation, then you have the second most populous state and the third most populous state in the nation, taking away some of the incentives that foster all this illegal immigration. And hopefully the federal government will at some point say, okay, we need to fix this system.
I'm confused. What are the incentives?
Any incentive.
Well, what incentives are you taking away at this point?
Well, we're taking away the inducements, right? So if you're an illegal immigrant and you can go get a driver's license and drive around, that's an incentive. If you go to a state that doesn't have...
But this issue, I mean, I remember, I'm old, you're not as old, but I remember Jeb Bush very articulately making the case about why letting those who are here undocumented be able to have driver's license or ID is important, because, you know, if that person gets into an accident, you want to be able to identify who that person is. You want them to have insurance. You want them to have those things. All you end up doing is probably hurting U.S. citizens in the process by taking away the ability for them to have ID cards.
No, I disagree with that. I disagree. I think with the federal government coupled with an open porous southern border, you have a Secretary Mayorkas really not enforcing people and demonizing the actual law enforcement on the border patrol agents, and you couple that with making it pretty easy for illegal immigrants to assimilate into communities and not be held accountable for coming over illegally or skipping their court dates or letting their visas run out. All we're doing is we're creating the environment where we're fostering more and more illegal immigration. We care about immigrants. Republicans care. Everyone cares about immigrants. We want people to come to this country, but we want them to come legally.
When we come back, the new chair of the Florida Democratic Party, Nikki Fried.